Rankin Little Cayman, your station, your voice. All things Cayman, one radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Oh, I think they're doing a great job. A lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Dwayne. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoyed this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon. What a terrific Tuesday after a torrential downpour over the weekend. Trust and pray everybody's safe. And our prayers and thoughts are with those in the region who have not escaped unscathed. But I'm honored to welcome to our studio, one of our excellent colleagues in our fantastic sales team, Ms. Kathy Miller, to join us as we sort of facilitate a discussion. So, Kathy, it's going to be a pleasure having you sit with us this afternoon.
It absolutely will be a pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me join you to co-host Talk Today with you this week, Sterling.
Thank you very much. And our first guest is going to be Joshua J. Gilbert. And at 12:45, we're going to get into some, little things that transpire within our legislative assembly. Our parliament. So stay tuned for Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Fidelity Bank. For all your banking needs, visit fidelitygroup.com. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Flow.
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. And, they said, put on a happy face. And sometimes I know it's challenging, but I have to call those things that aren't as if they were. And I'm honored that we have those who are continually, on their knees, praying and fasting. And we are eternally grateful for the many blessings from on high. Well, there's incredible talent within our shores. And we're glad that those conventions sometimes on the back. Joshua J. Gilbert, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's great to be back again.
All right. We're going to get into the meat of the matter as we were, just sharing. If you join us, our wonderful Kathy Miller from our excellent sales team joins us. And it's phenomenal that we have such an incredible resource, just within this bunker we call Radio Cayman. This is a safe structure. Right, Kathy?
Absolutely. We're very multifaceted in Radio Cayman, very multi-talented, and I'm happy to be here. So usually when I join you on Talk Today, I'm reading a bio of people that you're going to be interviewing, or I've done kind of my own things as well, but this is more...
Not today, TD.
Yeah, no, not today. This is definitely a straight Talk Today session.
There we go. And I'm glad that Joshua, as an author, joins us. And I like to bake and I like to eat even more, but I don't know if I've ever combined vanilla and vinegar in any in a combination. So Joshua, as you tell us first off, this particular new creation of yours, from that artistic and talented mind. First off, vanilla and vinegar, that's the latest sort of offering from you. What is it? And how did you come up with the title? Grab that mic, pretend you're on the stage, man, and singing like a daddy, and let's hear those pipes, man.
All right, well, I thought Vanilla and Vinegar was a very catching title. Don't ask me where it came from. I just thought it just came to me. Well, that's a very catchy title. And it's set in the Cayman Islands. It's set between Cayman Brac and Grand Cayman. And as you can see the cover, that is Spot B.
See, no, that was that's good.
I might not have known that was Spot Bay at all.
Joshua,
but I did read your expert, so I did see or I did read that little bit that you were speaking, and I think it was a part that you had it set up in the BRAC. So I was like, okay, this is where that family setting is coming from the BRAC. But what I noticed off the bat from those few pages that were available to read online was the guinnep tree, the patties, and the Pepsi for lunch. It was those things that very simple to Cayman, but that's really setting the scene.
Yeah. That's the beautiful part. I mean, we read works of international authors, and they'll talk about maybe the streets of Paris or somewhere in London or even any other part of the world, sometimes places we've traveled, but if we're not from that area, there's no familiarity.
Right.
Joshua writes, and I'm thinking, I can relate to the Pepsi in the patty. The guinnep tree, oh, geez, I remember Johnny that fell out, but thankfully he didn't get hurt. Those sorts of things,
yes.
Right? So, Joshua, with that in mind, I mean, is it one that you write from what you know and use the settings that are familiar to you? Or is it just, what's the process like?
Well, the process, it just comes to me. As cliche as that sounds, it just comes to me and I roll with it. So, but I really wanted to do something set in the Cayman Islands, and I did.
Well, it's a memoir, Vanilla and Vinegar, a memoir. So is this? So for me, memoirs are, I'm going to talk about my life. Is it, or somebody else's if I'm writing about? So, is it? I guess hinting on your life and how you grew up.
It's loosely based.
Okay.
On my life, loosely.
Okay.
The creative license. These creatives, yeah. Next one can be loosely based on. No, just kidding. But for the listeners, I mean, Vanilla and Vinegar definitely is, without question, very catchy. Set the stage. What is it about?
Well, it's about a guy growing up.
Sorry, is this a tall guy, handsome guy, a West Bay guy? What kind of guy? No, it was a guy growing up.
Well, you just described a Caymanian right there, I think.
There you go. It's a guy.
No, it's a guy, he lives in a cash-strapped household. The mother does odd jobs. The father works for
Public
Works. Right? And he grows up and he decides, I want to be a fireman. And they're like, well, why do you want to be a fireman for? Why don't you go to college? And he sort of rebels. And he ends up in selling numbers.
Okay.
And eventually he gets caught. And, shoot, I'm trying to avoid the spoilers here, but...
Right.
Okay, so he gets caught, and then he gets caught. No, it's good. But that's the beautiful part of Kath. I mean, you read the sort of the excerpt.
Yep.
And it was a teaser. And then having that Cayman connection, you start to think, okay, I can relate to from the guineps to the selling of numbers to the rebellious tone that we may have as young people. Your parents want you to do something. Not you, though, because you're a good child.
My mother would have something to say about that. But I think what hit me from that bit that I did read was it did remind me a lot of Cayman, not even 2 generations ago or a generation ago, but right now, because what your writing was saying was there's the main character, Danny, and his father is saying, I want you to get a government scholarship. They're just giving them away like hotcakes right now, kind of thing.
Credit union pens.
Yeah, credit union pens, you did say, yeah. So, and that's something I noticed when I first moved here, was the amount of government scholarships that were given out to students. It's pretty amazing, and I think it's something to very much take advantage of. But the father in the story is speaking about, in his generation, they didn't have that opportunity, and men went out to sea, so they were seamen, or they had to go overseas and work in some other land for how long and just send money back. So there was that point of, you have this opportunity, you don't want to grow up like us and be cash strapped and not have these educational opportunities and the chance to build so much more. And as a child, as a teenager, that can be really hard to understand because you don't necessarily feel the burden of financial difficulty. You don't really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand what your parents are going through unless, you know, your food is very specifically rationed out and you don't get anything but one pair of shoes a year, and those might be hand-me-downs or, you know, from a thrift store or something. So in that sense, you don't realize that as a child. But reading that, I'm saying, well, this still goes on today. A lot of people don't realize that they have that great opportunity to get that scholarship, to go away, to really be something a lot more than what they might have really ever dreamt of. Nothing wrong with being a fireman. That's a very honorable, great job to have.
Yeah.
But as I listen to you too, I mean, and I'm glad because that's sort of the take I got as well, that here's the sacrifice of the parents in terms of making sure that there's food on the table, there's shelter, and this push for the child to get, sort of in my parlance, this piece of paper, go off to university and get this piece of paper, because that positions you for more, not just more pay, but more opportunity here or elsewhere. And it's not just for you to do this thing because you can. And I think as I would gather how the book is going to unfold, you know, this conflict between what you want as that young person who knows everything, and then married against the wisdom and the sacrifice of the parents who, you know, want the very best for you. Maybe when we come back from the break, Joshua, you can choose to read some excerpts from the book if you wish. Tell us about it. We can talk a little bit more about what it is like being an author here. I have so much respect and value people like yourselves. If Kathy doesn't mind, as an example of what you're doing, the production and the commercials and the script writing and stuff, that's a lot of creative talent that we get to see almost immediately. Nobody gets to see how much hours, time put in producing and editing and then finally. But for an author, this could be months and years of just constant write and rewrite. Maybe we can talk a bit about that. For those that are listening, I'm glad to have Kathy Miller join us, but we're excellent company equally of author Joshua J. Dilbert from the BRAC. So stay tuned for Talk Today.
King Sports Center takes pride in being more than just an ordinary gymnasium. For 14 years, their multi-purpose facility has been providing the community with a variety of sporting, recreational, and relaxation activities. King Sports Center has a bowling alley, lounge bar, multi-purpose rooms, powerhouse gym, rock climbing wall, bungee jumping, a 10,000 square foot rink, and so much more. For more information on the variety of services, call their friendly staff today at 946-5464 or email kings@candw.ky or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, your one-stop shop for fitness, recreation, and relaxation.
JN Money Card. When my land up at JN, me get the money card with them. Just show them your ID and give them your TRN. Go and use at the ATM or swipe instead then. And when you need more cash, and make your family send it in a flash. From abroad to card, get the JN Money Card. It's safe, convenient, and free. JN Money Card only available and used in Jamaica. Call 345-945-2014 for details.
Miracle Brokers International, your worldwide movers and freight forwarders, continues to work hard to improve their expertise to provide you with the first-class service you have come to expect. Now, together with Consolidated Freight Line, CFL, the specialist in logistical and global cargo solutions, customers can rely on an expanded team of moving professionals that gets the job done in a timely manner. Whether it's your prized possessions, full container loads, less than container loads, ro-ro cargo, or construction equipment, from door to port services, or across the oceans, from destinations such as the U.S., Canada, Asia, the Caribbean, Central and South America, among others. Miracle Brokers and CFL Combined Networks offers hundreds of expert connections that take the stress out of moving and shipping services. Call today for your free estimate, 949-5989. You can also log on to www.miraclebrokers.com. Miracle Brokers is located at the end of Kingbird Road, just past CUC. Miracle Brokers, the art of packing and moving, 949-5989.
Talk today.
but I do have some questions.
Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Catherine Miller for sitting with us. And we have Joshua J. Dilbert. Catherine, when we think of having people from the Bracken in our studio, even though it's not that far away, it just reminds us that the beauty of three islands, one people. It's amazing the talent that we have flowing through the veins of our people.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right, Joshua, when you were writing this particular iteration, Vanilla. Well, Vanilla.
Vanilla, that's a new word.
Vanilla
like that.
and Vin.
No, Vanilla. Hey, you know how to practice that? Vanilla. No, Vanilla and vinegar. No, I joke and jest with words, but words are powerful and important. So maybe that'll become a word, vanilla. You think so? So vanilla and vinegar. It is catchy. As you're writing, what's your process like for writing to help to encourage, those would-be authors, poets, other creatives that are out there?
Well, my process is, but like I said, it just comes to me and I roll with it, and it's like it comes into my head and I'm like, well, this is what you should do. I guess it comes from above.
Mm.
It was a way of expression for you.
But then because
yes.
I heard you and you made it sound so easy. It comes to you and you write it. But then is it a discipline then? Do you walk with pen and paper, a computer? I mean, maybe a typewriter, I don't know. People are like, what's a typewriter? And then you record those thoughts because, it comes to you and you roll with it. Yeah, but that's because you're smart and creative and disciplined. How does that work?
Yeah, it is, discipline. I mostly do everything from either my phone or my computer.
I used to do everything with my chair, but that's a different story. I mean, if you why he's trying hard for a joke today. All right. We're offering up an opportunity if you wanted to read any little passage, we invite you. But in the story, anything in particular that sort of stood out to you when you were writing, either recollection from something growing up or the characters? I'm told by authors that the characters speak to them. They have a voice. They take on their own persona, as it were. And perhaps people who don't understand that may think of, weirdness, but it happens, right? You get into the zone and you're writing, and it just comes to you, the characters take on a life of their own.
Well, yeah, very much so.
All right. Any particular incident that unfolded as you were going through the writing process that you recall that really, really sticks with you?
I think when he gets caught,
mm-hmm.
because, it was a bit of a challenge because, I lived a good life growing up. I've never been arrested, and
that can change. That's good. I pray not.
No, I
don't recommend it.
I pray not.
I really hope not. But
he's like,
I challenged myself this time, because I spoke on things that I didn't really experience, And
it is a subject too that the whole number selling, for instance, in the Cayman context, that is somewhat taboo, but maybe like the push globally for legalizing ganja or decriminalizing. And I'm quite sure, the semantics there. The selling of numbers and lottery and gambling potential could be that next thing in our jurisdiction that becomes, needs to be addressed and legalized and not this thing that is, sort of taboo, as it were. So, Catherine, what do you think? I mean, topics like that are toucher for our society and for authors and others to use the creative process to highlight them, gives the society a chance to discuss them, to face them head on.
What do I think in particular about
generally which
taboo topics such as numbers, perhaps? People got to make money some way sometimes, and it's not always in a way that's regulated or necessarily allowed. I don't see how numbers particularly hurts people, but this is my opinion. Gambling on a large scale, you'll see studies all over the world. When you bring a casino in or any sort of a gambling facility into neighborhoods, the crime goes up tremendously in those areas. So you can't deny that. However, that has to do a lot with the population, the economy as is, the neighborhoods that it's going into, the access that people have. So besides that, when it does come to something like this, you say you've never been arrested. I'm not going to ask if you've dealt with numbers. However,
I used to.
However,
as an accountant,
well, in the sense of we know what kind of numbers we're talking about here. Now, in understanding something that, it's not a lifestyle that you've experienced per se. How do you do the research on it, and how do you find out? Okay, this is somebody did get arrested and they were dealing in this sort of crime. What is the process involved? What was their experience? Do you do research in finding somebody that went through that, or was it you're kind of you're assuming, okay, this is how I think it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have a reference section at the back.
Well, all right. Well, I haven't seen the hard copy of the book, so you got to let us and the listeners know. We do not have the reference section to look at right now.
Yes, I have the reference section here. Right. Yes, I did my homework on this one.
Well, I'm glad that you shared, because I find that even though it's a novel and it's exercise of creative license and the like, there's a lot of research, a lot of background that goes into it in this process. How much of that and how long has that sort of been in the works before you sit down and really get it to where you say, what, this is what I like, this is the final product?
Well, the research is as I go along. Like I started, and if it warrants research, then I do the research on it, and then
I guess too, and for those listening, that is Joshua J. Dilbert, and we have Kathy Miller. So if there's any other reason to tune in, that is in itself excellent. But it's sort of very much like the student in the classroom being given an assignment by the teacher, whether it's a term paper, whether it's a composition, whatever they're called these days. Here's the assignment, and then the child comes back and presents it to their class or whichever. It's that developing process that could become the next author of international mega hits.
Well, it is in school, an assignment, that's one thing. Yeah. So a question that I have for you, Joshua, is, did you self-publish?
I did.
Okay, so that's a very hard thing to do. That takes a tremendous amount of your own efforts and money and connections and time, because people who do have publishers, they're given a more narrow amount of time, but they're also backed financially. You can just sit there and write, and you're basically paid to get it together, but your deadline is in 3 months or 6 months. You don't necessarily have that pressure of a deadline unless you put it on yourself, right?
That's true.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
It took maybe about 7-8 months. It might have been less than that.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Sometimes I couldn't always get to it.
What was your publishing process like? What were your first steps in saying, okay, I'm going to get this book printed? What were the first things that you had to think about to do that?
Well, the publishing house, which was Lulu, they did all the hard work.
Okay.
And it was very quick. Actually, I could have probably put it out sooner, but the pandemic hit. And yes. I'm just getting to it now, but
it's okay.
But this is, for the listener, this isn't your first publication. You've had a few others before this.
This is the third book.
Yeah, right. And I know we had a chance to chat even with the first one. And the process has been different. How would you describe? It's 3, but it's not a trilogy. So with the 3 of them, the first one, the second one, and the third one, they're all different in a sense.
They are.
So you've been able to sort of move beyond. Some authors tend to be pigeonholed. That's a mystery writer, that's a romance novelist, that's a sci-fi.
Right.
Yeah, you're very, very creative and tapping into all different sort of genres. Would that be the
genres is the right word?
Would that be the right word? Okay.
And the other books, The Mordenham Acres,
The Mordenham Acres,
and Sarma.
Sarma. I have all three books here today.
Oh, okay. Describe those two different genres then, or what those are about.
Well, this one is The Mordenham Acres is more of a children's book.
Okay.
This one is more tween.
Sarma?
Where did you get the name Sarma?
I have no idea.
Because it's interesting because in my family's culture, sarma is a dish. It's a dish that I cannot stand, but it's one of the most popular dishes, and if I fed it to my friends, they would love it. It's
really?
Sarma. It's a Serbian-Croatian dish, or Yugoslavian.
I never knew that until now.
Yes, it's cabbage, and inside the cabbage or sauerkraut, inside that is it's like meats and onions all diced up.
Wow,
I can't stand
that.
sauerkraut, so it's
is the cabbage fermented in this one? In the sarma?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Like it's cooked for the longest time. I can't stand that. It's not for me. And every time I go home, my mom tries to. I'm like 40 years later, I'm telling you, I don't like that. This is your favorite food, not mine. That's what I'm asking about that.
Give me a Pepsi and patty.
Yes, 2 patties.
2 patties. From Mr. Norberg Bakery too. Okay, sorry.
It's all right. I think we have to go to a commercial break?
Almost, yeah. And then but our other guests for the next segment are lined up, and they get in. Well, just so you know, they're up in the makeup. They get in prep. That's kidding. That's not true.
Hair and makeup.
Yeah. But Joshua, for those as we wrap up, for those who are looking for copies of all your books, but the latest one,
right. The latest one will be stocked at Crossroads General Store in Cairnbrat. That's a new shop there now.
Mm-hmm.
And then Grand Cayman is going to be at Pure Art. And before we wrap up, I just want to say, honestly, there are a few words in there. So parental advisory.
It's no problem.
I like the way you said a few words in there.
So,
what about online? Will it be available online?
Amazon.com.
Excellent. Okay,
I have a personal website as well, joshuajdilbert.com and lulu.com.
Can people order directly from your website? We want to send people to your website,
yeah.
joshuajdilbert.com. Yes. Okay. And they can read an excerpt from the book online at that website, joshuajdilbert.com.
Yeah, yes.
That's where I read mine.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Joshua, I hope that we'll have more opportunities, not only to talk about these books, but other works. Continue, the creative process. And it can be disheartening and sometimes daunting, a bit discouraging, but for whatever it's worth, I know Kathy joins me in commending you, encouraging you, and truly, saying to people, this is another way for us to show not just the love, but the nurture for Joshua, for the next, great author, poet, musician, any artistic person in our community. This is where we grow our own.
That's right. Absolutely. You can be an author. You can embark on other careers. You can do more than one thing. You can change your careers as your life goes on.
There you go. You might be just so important and become a talk show host. I'm just kidding. Joshua, congratulations. Very proud of you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you very much.
joshuajdilbert.com would be the best place to get it. If you're in the Brack, Crossroads, or here in Grand Cayman, Pure Art.
Pure Art. Yeah, they're committed to stocking the book. They're in Miami now, and they just have to reach here, and I will distribute as soon as they come.
Excellent.
Hey, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Continue the creative process.
All right. Thank you very much.
So after the break, Kathy, I'll be ready for what could be an intellectual discussion. Although we have you on Moxham, so maybe.
Well, yeah.
It may not be.
You're pushing the envelope there, Dwayne.
You want to know what you're going to be talking about?
I hope you know him really well. You might look at me unforgivingly.
Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best in sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Depending on the severity of a storm, it is possible that your home's plumbing or septic tank could be damaged. Hazard Management Cayman Islands recommends using a garbage bag to line at least 2 5-gallon containers with tight-fitting covers to use as a temporary toilet. Be sure to include personal sanitation supplies in your emergency kit, such as moist towelettes, feminine hygiene products, garbage bags, and rubber gloves. For more useful hurricane preparedness tips, visit the Water Authority's website at www.waterauthority.ky or follow us on social media.
Tell me something, Chanel. You nomophobic?
Nomo who?
Nomophobic.
What that is?
Well, our word of the week is nomophobia.
Nomophobia. It is a noun that means the fear or worry at the idea of being without your phone or unable to use it.
I wonder if Lorena, nomophobic.
This week we'll be having on the flex Prototype honorees Kimon Chambers and
Lorena Marehan.
As always, you can join us this Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. right here on Radio Cayman 89.9 FM, but you can also check us out on YouTube Live. And for Youth Flex, the program for all people by young people. Youth Flex, more than talk.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And thank you so much for joining us. And I trust and pray that all that is on our day, whatever trials and tribulations that may come our way, in fact, that we can still give thanks, be grateful, and at the very least, put the best face and foot forward. Always honored to wake up to see another day. I'm glad to be surrounded by people who, likewise share that same penchant for life and enjoy it. Glad that our excellent colleague from the fantastic sales department. So if you need something advertised, promoted to reach the widest audience, well, check the Radio Cayman sales team. Catherine Miller, thank you. I can't say enough, when you and the team, the job you do, but join us here. So good afternoon again.
Good afternoon to you too.
All right. To our listeners, we're going to get an attempt to be educated, informed, enlightened, entertained, and at some point you may even be enthused and encouraged as we talk about the Legal Services Bill with a great mind and intellect and eloquence of Sarma Jackson.
Oh, I was wondering who you were referring to.
Good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon to the listening public. Just to explain, Dwayne, I felt inclined to come. I don't seek public audience much. I spent most of my career just talking, so I try to avoid it as much as possible.
So has Dwayne.
That was in the classroom, though.
That's our stock and trade, I suppose. But I felt inclined to come on air and declare the air, literally, because there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of weeks with the advent of the new Legal Services Bill 2020. And as much as I wish I could tell you it's exciting and new, it's anything but. It is a different iteration of its previous versions. The old title has been retired, the Legal Practitioners Bill. I suppose that now has a pejorative ring to it, so it was thought that to make it more palatable, we'd start with a new label. However, the fundamental concepts are all the same. All of our concerns, or most of them, is still there. Between the retirement or the pulling of the last bill by the then Premier, is still the Premier, we had descended into a lot of confusion and concern. By we I mean folks like myself who operate small law firms, Caymanian-owned law firms, and sole practitioners. Now, just full declaration. I am the president of a small organization called the Association of Legal Professionals and Advocates, ALPA we call it. We have 20 members. That association is comprised of a membership which, in the constitutional documents itself, it's a privately registered company, much like SILPA. And that entity can only be joined by persons who work at a Caymanian-owned law firm that has no more than 5 lawyers working in it. So it's safe to say, despite the unfortunate connotation, we represent the smaller firms. That is by no means something that to be ashamed of. In our membership, there is a wide cross-section of practices. Some people in the financial services industry, strange enough. Others doing general practice in the courts, criminal advocacy, etc. And by and large, the bulk of the work done to give the public what we call access to justice is done by folks within that realm, right? The smaller firms. We all know these things, but I'm here today not to represent ALPA per se, or I'll share with you some of the recent experiences we've had and where we're going with that, but to share my personal perspective. It became clear to me that I needed to do so when I received just the other day a call from the leader of the opposition, who everyone knows is a personal friend of mine, despite the amount of argument that we've had over the years about many things, expressing, well, curiosity. He asked me, how is it that you've seen the new legal services bill? This was literally 2 days or a day before the bill was put out. And I said, I haven't seen it. I've seen the 2 versions that were sent. It turns out it's 3 versions, I think, from the Attorney General's chambers. This is a new legal services bill now. So before the official version was put into published in green paper form, there were 2 other drafts floating about, which we were told weren't for public consumption, and they were addressing our concerns being ALPA, and that SILPA wasn't particularly happy about it, which I suppose was intended to make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But I personally don't care what makes them tick or makes them happy or sad. What I care about is protecting the integrity of the legal profession, particularly for folks like myself that eke out a living, right? Doing things that benefit Caymanians, unlike, the majority of the 900 and odd lawyers we have here, and probably 1,000 odd working, I keep saying illicitly, there's no better description, clandestinely overseas without any licensure. No, that is important because this bill proposes to do what others propose to do in terms of wholesale licensure of overseas practitioners who have been, or persons who have been holding themselves overseas as Cayman practitioners. The majority of them, as far as we can discern from our investigations, have never been to Cayman, never been called to Cayman Bar. And despite our pleas, I've personally put this to the Attorney General and the Premier myself, October last year, the 22nd October 2019, when we met to express our concern. We were told then that we were going to be consulted about this bill. We really haven't been. In that we were shown what was being proposed, but none of our fundamental positions which we put forward have been taken on. But back to the conversation with the leader of opposition, he expressed to me that the Premier had expressed to him that the AG was putting out a bill which even Sarma Jackson was happy with. Now, I don't know how he purported to know that, because as far as I can tell, me and him have been broadcasting in different wavelengths for a long time now, a different bandwidth, to use the radio vernacular. But I didn't have a conversation with him about this bill since October of last year. So I found it strange. A day later, this bill came out. We started looking at it again No, the AG used the term, and I understood they referenced it in the LA about review fatigue. But if it's anyone in the world that should have review fatigue, he was referring to the constant review of the anti-money laundering regulations in that context, which is a whole different area of concern that's sort of interconnected to this whole thing, at least as regards SILPA. Well, I don't know what is going to be done with this bill in terms of amendments, but I can say from my personal perspective, clearly, and I want the Premier and the AG and everybody else to listen, this is not, in my humble opinion, fit for purpose. It addresses in some small ways some of the concerns we had. It does not address the major items which we've circulated to the entire LA from over a year ago, what ALPA's fundamental positions were.
Mr. Jackson, can I ask?
Sure.
It was 2016 when this bill was last brought up and rejected. Is that correct?
The bill was proposed in 2016. It was called the Legal Practitioners Bill 2016. It was pulled in early 2017.
And then the Cayman Islands Legal Practitioners Association was formed despite the bill not being passed, right?
Well, they will say that it was due to the urgency of needing to do something. So they amalgamated the Caymanian Bar Association and the then Cayman Islands Law Society, which were two different creatures altogether. I don't even know legally speaking how they were merged, but they were purportedly merged and then disbanded. But yeah.
And in those 4 years, now that we're at 2020, you had mentioned that there was no real consultation going on.
No, none at all, really.
Okay. That's very interesting. So a bill was proposed and then rejected, and there's been 4 years for the powers that be to come up with a new bill. However, from your experience, you weren't necessarily reached out to or consulted about this.
Yeah, and I have to say there's nothing unusual about that. I'm not consulted on much anymore by this government. That used to be different. I don't know. Well, I think I know why it was. It probably connected to the whole 2016-17 debacle, because this bill is important, not just to the legal industry, but the Cayman Islands economy. We have been complaining, I have been complaining for something in 12 years now, that those overseas practitioners that I adverted to earlier are a constant, serious economic drain on this country, simply by virtue of the fact that whilst they are taking the lion's share of, or a huge chunk of, it's even hard to ascertain exactly, but we know that they're doing a lot of the financial services work in remote locations like Mauritius, right? In satellite offices owned and or controlled by local law firms or law firms that are anchored in the islands. They practice Cayman Islands law, pretend to be Cayman lawyers, despite the fact that they're not. They make a lot of money, but what they do in that, by virtue of that arrangement, is they circumvent entirely the immigration law regime. So there's no competitive process for jobs, because that guy never ever has to compete with a Caymanian for a job. But worse yet, but particularly where we are relying on significant income from work permit fees for professional jobs, they're depriving government of the direct revenue that is foregone in them practicing overseas in a satellite office versus practicing here. Now the big firms will tell you, oh, that's because we need them on the ground there. They're doing lots of work. I'm sure there's a ton of financial services work to be done, to be availed of in Mauritius. I mean, the constant barrage and insult and intelligence continues. It's deeply enshrined in this bill, right? Because this bill purports to give licensure to all those folks by virtue of some nebulous concept of an affiliate of a recognized firm. Same old terminology. And there's no criteria for this, for qualifying for this special status. There's no special responsibility enshrined in its legislation for acquiring that status. And there's certainly no financial benefit to the country from that firm acquiring that status. And we can see from the actions, because history is a hell of a teacher. recent history in particular, with what the clamoring that happened with regards to the formation, the creation of SILPA, etc., if that is what is going to happen when this bill is promulgated, then what we're going to have is the same group of the old boys club in Cayman controlling the gate to acquiring that status. And Cayman doesn't get any benefit from it and does nothing but lose tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. No, particularly in the times that we're in, no one at the beginning of this year foresaw what we would be confronted with now. I say this in particular to this bill, but generally in relation to everything the government does. If there was a time for frugality, right, and austerity in terms of government expenditure, now is the time. I'm all for encouraging economic growth by injecting capital or injecting monies into the economy by virtue of pension payouts, etc. But at some point in time, the bottom would drop out of that bucket.
Right.
Who's going to pay for that?
So, apologies. Let's pause quickly and take a break. When we return, can we talk more about the economic consequence, the financial loss to the government coffers, the potential reputational damage, and other things, and then the importance of the legislation relative to maybe the impediments for future generations of Caymanians practicing as we go through it. We're also hopeful that, in all seriousness, Johan Moxon will be able to join us as well. So hopefully he'll be able to find his way. Johan, if you're looking, it's the 2-story building behind the glass house. Come through the parking lot. No, not a problem. I think you can have an escort. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
You are listening to Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have, on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. While most government schools reopen today, students at Savannah Primary won't be back on their school campus until next week due to damage from Tropical Storm Eta. Savannah is expected to reopen on Monday, November 16th. In international news, a Vatican report has found that 2 recent popes and church officials ignored allegations about a U.S. cardinal later found guilty of sex abuse. Theodore McCarrick, a former Archbishop of Washington, D.C., was expelled from the priesthood after the Vatican concluded its investigation last year. It has now issued a report into how he was able to rise through the ranks despite allegations going back decades. The Brazilian clinical trial for a Chinese COVID-19 vaccine has been suspended after health authorities reported a severe adverse incident. Brazilian health regulator Anvisa said the incident took place on October 29th, but gave no details. The suspension reportedly followed the death of a volunteer, but it is not clear if it was related to the trial. Australian researchers say the discovery of a 2-million-year-old skull in South Africa throws more light on human evolution. The skull was a male Paranthropus robustus, a cousin species to Homo erectus, a species thought to be direct ancestors of modern humans. Those are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. For the latest in news and information,
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon, welcome back, and thanks for joining us. And we're very hopeful that in addition to our guest, Sarma Jackson, we'll have Johan Moxon join us. But thankfully, Ms. Kathy Miller sits with us. So it's going to be great to have this discussion as we look at the new lipstick on the pig, legal services bill, as opposed to the old legal practitioners bill. Is that an improper way to put it, Sammy?
That is it in a nutshell. This is a slightly more distilled version with a new label.
All right.
It was rebranded,
yes.
in other words.
Yes.
It happens.
Yes.
So, Kathy, you were sharing earlier.
Well, You had mentioned, Mr. Jackson, that we can have people in other countries that are practicing Cayman Islands law. However, they're not allowed to. They're not qualified to. But I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm working for a firm, a major firm, practicing Cayman Islands law in another country, isn't that firm ensuring that I do have these qualifications? Why are you going to pay me $10,000 a month approximately, let's say, and yet you don't even know that I have these qualifications, that I did pass the bar and I can do this?
Well, the thing is, we don't know what they're being paid. That's the first thing. It could.
What does what they're being paid matter, though, in that sense?
It doesn't really. But to answer your question, these folks might appear to the outside world in whatever jurisdiction they're in to be a legal secretary, a paralegal, some member staff of a satellite office, or they might be a lawyer registered in that jurisdiction. That exists as well, or some other jurisdiction. Okay. I'm not saying that this is purely a sweatshop operation. It could be. I don't know for sure to what extent that comparison applies. But one thing is for sure: those folks that operate those satellite offices are enjoying all the benefits, right, that they obtain from operating in the Cayman jurisdiction. Our tax-free status, our reportedly sound governance, our their quick access to a financial services division of the courts with highly trained judges, etc. They get all that benefit, but without having at least some of their workforce on the ground in Cayman. So it presents a number of problems, a myriad of problems, because there's no way to directly regulate those folks, right? So we don't know actually what they're doing. And in this era of recent enhancements to money laundering, anti-money laundering regulation, for example, one wonders how you manage that with those overseas practices and practitioners. Do they have to comply to the same standard as a Cayman registered attorney? I know we're at pains over that now because myself and a number of others have sued the government. We've constitutionally challenged the government's actions vis-a-vis the arrangement they made with SILPA and the creation of this fictitious entity named CARA. I was on this show a number of months ago talking about that and all our concerns. That, to some extent, is ostensibly addressed in here in that this legislation transfers the supervisory authority designation from SILPA, who had delegated it to CARA, into the new board. And the board is something I want to discuss because a board is a curious concept enshrined in statute. Boards, we refer to the Central Planning Authority, for example, as the planning board, right? But it's a board of directors appointed by cabinet. It's one of the older models, so it's not even a good one to follow. I myself don't even know if it conforms to the Public Authorities Bill, which we had the advent of that in 2019. Every statutory authority now needs to become a public authority by operation of law, needs to comply with the Public Authorities Law. So I wonder if the creation of this board, which purports to be an august board by virtue of the fact that two ex officio members, the two primary ex officio fixed members, would be the Chief Justice and Attorney General.
Right.
Which I think presents a problem in and of itself that I'll come to address. But the concept of the board itself is, I say, nebulous because is it a statutory authority? And these are directors? Because when you use the word board, for example, I've sat in the ICTA, the ERA, the Health Services Authority. I was a board member. I was a member of the board of directors. I was a director. In some instances, I was the managing director or the legal member or whatever. But that's what board means to me. Now, if you look in the relevant legislation that created those boards, it talks about a board of directors. But this thing says the board, constitution of the board. So this goes against one of ALPA's and my own personal fundamental requirements that we say should be enshrined in the law, which is that this new regulator for the legal industry needs to regulate everything. And it can have, obviously, adjunct bodies that specialize in certain things like anti-money laundering legislation. But at the end of the day, it needs to be a properly structured, independent, functioning public authority that conforms to the concept that is required. It is required to conform to by the provisions of the Public Authorities Law. This doesn't purport to do that. Then there's problems with that. Because you automatically, once the Public Authorities Law kicks in, you have provisions for conflicts of interest, how they're dealt with, all those sorts of stuff. And it makes sense to amalgamate all those things in one sort of constitution, enshrined in one single piece of legislation to regulate, so as to make uniform, there's good governance practice in that.
Right.
But this can't do that, I believe, because of the two members being the Chief Justice and the Attorney General.
Well, then other members being appointed by the Premier and then the Leader of the Opposition as well.
Yeah. I think, first of all, you typically don't have a board with even numbers unless you have a cast and vote, right?
Right.
But I think in their mind, the creators of this bill, whoever they may be, I'll come to talk about that in a little bit, had in mind a much larger board comprised of a committee that you will see when you read through the provisions that this board can form,
right.
Comprised of partly of the board. And if you keep the board small, then you can disproportionately populate the board with a larger number of committee members, right, co-opted to help the board make decisions. And then it transforms into something where the people who are not actually officially appointed have control. That's exactly what we've seen with SILPA. That is exactly our concern with SILPA. Conflicts of interest abound. We can't have that. I mean, it's just, it would be laughable if it wasn't so shameful to see the disregard coming from even the Attorney General's office for the concept of conflicts of interest. I personally remember him and the Leader of the Opposition getting in a flap in the LA about whether Mr. Panton had a conflict of interest. Everything he has said and done since then, he told me CARA was created to erect a Chinese wall, create a Chinese wall of sorts for SILPA, because implicitly SILPA had conflicts,
right,
which we knew. So it's shameful to see that in creating a regulator, we're setting ourselves up for the same sorts of problems again. You said it best. This is a typical advertising gimmick, right?
The rebranding.
You just rebrand it, and all of a sudden that's transformative, and all of a sudden all the concerns about the previously labeled bill goes away. It doesn't.
So from what you've read with this bill and from your opinion, the SILPA, there's no difference between SILPA and this new Legal Services Board.
Yeah, there is. This board will legitimize SILPA's hitherto challenged position. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
SILPA has been SILPA's creation, SILPA's existence, SILPA's status, that is, say, being awarded supervisory authority status by the government, has been challenged judicially. Those lawsuits are all of a sudden going quiet. Nobody wants to proceed with them. I guess no one wants to. I certainly have better things to do with my time. I wish I didn't have to sue the government. But at some point, we're going to have a determination about whether we were right or we were wrong. And I feel good about our chances. If I were to tell you that I didn't believe in what I had done, I would be telling you, that'd be tantamount to me telling you that I've lost faith, absolutely lost faith in this jurisdiction. I'm not there yet, but I can tell you what, based on what I'm seeing, I'm getting there, right? And I'm somebody that belongs to this country. I don't have anywhere else to go, right? I've made a living in this country. And I'm just sick and tired of seeing the same old. And back to what I said earlier about review fatigue, I certainly have it. This must be the 12th iteration of a bill that some form of this bill that I've read.
If I then could ask, because not only is, and I probably won't use the phrase after this, review fatigue. We like to throw about words and phrases, and it puts people off, right? But from the perspective of the layman, so that the person who either A, is not a lawyer, B, is working in the financial services sector, for them they say, well, this don't affect me, I really don't care. But does it A, affect them, and not just them now, but them and their offspring for generations to come? And could this potentially be a precedent for other professions, whether it's accountants, lawyers, doctors,
architects?
They're
suffering from the same thing.
Right. So is this then just potentially one more thing that could be a bone of contention for other things and Caymanians for generations to come?
But there's more to it than just the deprivation of opportunities for young and up-and-coming Caymanians. I have two stepkids that are lawyers now, right? Both of them work with me. I have two kids who are, one is in UCCI and the other one is in sixth form. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to encourage either one of the two of them to pursue law unless and until we can bring this whole profession to its senses. So there's that aspect of it. But there's the economic damage as well. Anything that deprives the government of revenue, right, in a significant way, and there's nothing more significant than this. We ran the numbers way back when. When I say we, I mean people like myself, Teresa Pitcairn, Sherry Borden, Ian Paget Brown. We were looking at what's the damage, right? Back then they told us they had 180 lawyers collectively. They call them lawyers, persons working as overseas practitioners, Caymanian practitioners. And you don't have to be a math whiz to figure out if the lowest work permit fee, I think, for an associate lawyer is like $32,000 per annum. When you add that up, right, you start to see the direct revenue the government is losing. But worse yet, they have perverted the application of the immigration law by allowing people to circumnavigate the provisions of immigration law because they don't no longer have to compete for jobs with Caymanians. So these firms don't need to grow at the rate they actually should be growing at on the ground in Cayman, because if they can expand their overseas practice, they avoid that process, that expensive, tedious process. Why would we want to do that? Why do we want to give away money, right? And we take on constantly other projects, right? I'm sure Johan will talk a lot about that when he comes, that cost us an arm, a leg, and a future without any sort of economic impact, particularly now, right? I can't even say post-COVID because none of us know what the future holds with that. One thing we do know, I was speaking or communicating with Mr. Paget Brown the other day, brilliant man, who took the initial stance on this in the well of the Grand Court and said what he had to say. And he said, look, there are firms that are shrinking in London and New York and all over the place, right, as a result of COVID. Why would we want to do anything now without doing a economic impact assessment on it? Something that we know is depriving us of revenue. That's just suicide. And I agree. And we need to really get to grips with this thing. And the government, look, it is not any private entity's job to do anything other than to try to promote their own profits or profitability. But it's the government's job to make sure that that's balanced. Yes, you don't want to make businesses unviable. You don't want to threaten their existence. You don't want to shut them down because of whatever political initiative. But one thing is for sure, they need to be paying the price and they need to be playing the game fairly. They need to be competing, and they already have a huge advantage by the disproportionate size of most of these firms, right? And we hear all manner of excuse. The Premier himself told me in the meeting last year, oh, well, you got to understand, we can't implement LCCL concept to law firms because they're global. And my answer to that was, surely that can't be the case, because all of these, there might be a global umbrella under which all these things operate, by virtue of the fact they have overseas affiliates, means when they're operating on the ground over there, they have a separate entity. We're talking about the people who are operating, the firms that operate in Cayman. They have to have licensure, they have to have an operational license. Something else I want to talk about. There's no requirement for an operational license under this law. In terms, you pay a fee, that's it. You pay to play, that's it. No fitness and propriety tests, no disqualifying criteria, no disciplinary criteria. I mean, after all, if we have a firm that's proven to be corrupt, right? If we come across that, if we have a fully functioning regulator, if that's what this purports to be, and that regulator discovers there's a firm that is inherently corrupt there at the partnership level and it needs to be shut down, what tools do we have for that? We have those tools even with CUC. We put those in the Electricity Regulatory Authority law back in 2008. Even when CUC owns all of the T&D, the transmission and distribution network in Cayman, government can step in and seize that. Why do we give these folks immunity and impunity? They can do whatever they want. There's no disciplinary action taken or proposed.
Just to remind our listeners, we are discussing the Legal Services Bill. We have guests Sammy Jackson, and just joining us in studio this afternoon is Johan Moxham. The bill is under a current 28-day public consultation period, and we are getting the viewpoints both of Mr. Jackson and now Mr. Moxham, who has just come to join us. Good afternoon, Mr. Moxham.
Afternoon to the hosts and to the listening audience.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Thank you
Moxham.
for the invitation.
We were having fun in your absence, my friend.
Apologies for being late.
I was trying to get a word in.
No, it's a good time. We're being told we got to go to a quick commercial break right now, so we'll get Mr. Moxham settled in and we'll return back to the conversation.
Thank you.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Digital is not a buzzword, it is a culture. At Digicel, we've made it our mission to enrich your digital lives. That's why we're bringing together more of all the experiences you love. The latest shows, the best of local and international music and radio, live sports, cloud storage, breaking news, HD video chats, and more. Welcome to Digital at Digicel, the Caribbean's fastest mobile network. Digicel, better together.
For the record.
For information that matters to you, the people. Hear from the government, the opposition, independents, and other experts on issues and solutions that affect you.
For the record.
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, tune into 89.9 and 93.9 FM from 7:30 to 9 a.m. for Cayman's new Straight Talk morning show. For the record.
I invite you to join me for the record. You are invited to be a part of this interesting and informative show. Embrace the opportunity to dialogue with your legislators, policymakers, and those charged with policy implementation.
For the record.
Brought to you by
Coca-Cola. Available across the Cayman Islands from Tortuga Distributors.
Accept no substitutes. Taste the feeling with Coca-Cola.
That thing we've been saying for 64 years, ignore it. Eat the KFC wings, drink the KFC gravy, fill up on fries. Just please forget the thing we normally suggest. You know, that thing you used to do with your tongue after finishing a delicious piece of our KFC chicken. We get it. It's not easy. There's a reason why it's been our slogan for over half a century. But the world's drastically changed of late, and as soon as we can embrace the change, the sooner we can all get back to doing what we do best. KFC. It's good.
Miller's Plumbing, with over 47 years of experience. They will get the job done for you on time, the first time. Call them at 949-4709 for a free estimate. Miller's Plumbing, a proud sponsor of Radio Cayman's 7 a.m. weather update.
Mr. Plumber, I've come to fix the sink.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Good afternoon to our listeners and welcome back to Talk Today. We are here discussing the Legal Services Bill with guests Sammy Jackson and Johan Moxham. I am Kathy Miller of the sales office, but I'm here helping Dwayne out with Talk Today as I'll be taking over on some shows in future dates to come. So,
well, thank you, Miss Kathy. And we have excellent guests, including Johan Moxham and Sarma Jackson. Gents, thanks very much for joining us. It is a ticklish, topic, but I'm glad that as individuals you've been so diligent in showing the public. I'm reminded of this importance, not just to the legal profession, but potential its impact across the economy and the potential reputational damage and the loss to the government coffers because of the non-collection of work permit fees, just in this first instance.
Yeah, and there's many other things, and I suppose to sort of segue into the Johan's thing, in my view, and he and I have spoken about this, and we agree, this is all part and parcel of the same thing that ails Cayman, right? Government blindly plodding ahead without any proper consultation of the wider public. They have their own special people they like to speak to about these things. And all their pet projects, and it seems to be that they're now in a desperate situation to get all this ambitious palette of many very, very costly things done. Costly in terms of direct, immediate costs, and costly in terms of losses to the Cayman Islands public, socio-economic damage, all that sort of stuff. And I'll let Johan speak to that. That's his forte. He has his soapbox. I don't have one, so but.
You guys are very passionate about this, clearly,
Absolutely.
and I could hear it with you. And I know Johan from previous times here on Talk Today and other shows that this is dear to you.
No, if you guys get fired today, I just want you to know it's Sarma's fault. To be honest, thank you so much for being brave enough to take on two monsters, and my friends in the Go-Op building. I know you're keenly listening, so. Press record now.
We're just trying to understand. I'm just trying to understand. The law, finance and law is not my cup of tea. I like marketing. I like PR. This is my thing. So coming to this bill, for Sammy earlier was saying that it's I use the word rebranding compared to what they had in 2016. But if for the people that are listening, what are the major benefits of this bill that will help protect Caymanians in your eyes, or do you believe it's disadvantageous to Caymanians?
If there's an advantage, I haven't seen it yet. There are aspects of this bill, I have to say, over which there's no controversy. We all want a central, a properly structured, independent regulator. That's desperately needed. I agree with that. That is the one thing we need to move forward with. But I'll demonstrate my concerns by asking a simple question. Why is it that the government hasn't seen fit to promulgate those non-controversial elements of the bill, which comprise, say, 2/3 of the language in here, over the past 12 years? It's all or nothing. They can't pass a piece of legislation. They claim we block it. We don't block it. We spent countless hours proposing amendments, engaging in discussions. We want this thing more than the big firms want it. What the big firms want, they don't want just like touch regulation. They want to be their own governors, their own regulators. They want to have a say. They want licensure of what they've done to date so that all is forgiven and forgotten, financially and otherwise. And they want to move forward with this type of structure where they get to do what they want to do and the rest of us can be damned. And why the one way that I didn't say to Dwayne earlier, or address earlier when Dwayne raised it, that this affects Cayman, goes to what I was saying earlier, that without us, without small local practitioners providing most of the services to the Caymanian community, who is the ordinary Caymanian going to turn to when they need some advice on land, a little company formed, someone to go to court to fight for them, to protect their rights, to file a constitutional action, some of that stuff that everyone takes for granted. When these small firms like mine dry up and go away, which they will, if these folks have their way, what's going to happen to the Cayman public? Where are they going to get legal representation from? Maples? Walkers? You really think so?
No. From my own experience, walking into one of the major firms, which clearly I can't name, it was a slap in the face and not a pleasant experience at all. And I was recommended to go there, but then I turned back to go to the lawyers that I do know that are Caymanian, they have their they're small firms. It's just a few people in it. And that's where I could get my answers. And a lot of the times, that's how it happens. And that's one of the beauties of this island is that you can go to people that you know and speak to. But when you go to the bigger conglomerates, it's much more daunting. And I'm going to stick with my people that I know. I prefer that process. And did I deal with an expat? Yes, I did deal with a foreigner in that sense. And it was looked at as...
This isn't about that. I mean,
no.
There's small law firms that have people in permits too.
Absolutely.
No problem there.
But really. one of the big factors in this bill is, well, that I've read, I don't know if this was previously proposed, but the 5 years post-qualification for a person, for a foreigner to come here, to have experience before you can practice as an attorney at law in the Cayman Islands. Do you think that's beneficial for Caymanians?
In what sense?
That a foreigner must have 5 years post-qualification experience.
I think that's a given. I think that's something we've been saying for many years, and that's one of these sort of distractions that they put in legislation so they can give it up. And we're supposed to feel like it's a major victory. Oh, we got them to go from 3 to 5 years PQE. Whoop-de-doo. Not to downplay that. That is significant in terms of keeping space open for Caymanians to be able to get to that level of expertise where they can function mostly on their own without direct supervision, etc. But I can tell you that in the whole grand scheme of things is insignificant, and it's something that we should be entitled to expect as a starting point. See, I for far too long I've been frustrated by this idea that we must celebrate when people perform the basic minimum task, right? That's what you're paid for. That applies to everything, government in particular. We shouldn't applaud you when you do your job. You're doing your job, you're getting paid for it.
You get an OBE partly nowadays.
All that too, yeah.
Yes, we do have a caller or two online. Sarma Jackson, together with Johan Moxham and the wonderful Kathy Miller. So let's go to the phones. Good afternoon and welcome as we talk about the Legal Services Bill, or what was formerly the Legal Practitioners Bill. Good afternoon, welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Dwayne.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. How are you today?
Pretty good, and good afternoon to your guest. This is Steve McField.
Afternoon, Doc.
Well, I am so happy that younger lawyers now are taking up the mantle, are taking up the fight, taking on Joseph Court of many colors, and trying to fight the battle. Because we have been trying to fight this since, I would say, 1988, when we formed. When I drafted the first memorandum on articles of the Cayman Bar Association, and because we had all these problems back then, not some of the problems we have today, but we have the problems back then of neglect. And they thought that because we were Cayman lawyers and we were sole practitioners and stuff, that we were nobody. We had to protect ourselves, so we formed the Bar Association. I remember the evening that was formed. It was being formed, and we were trying to get people to sign up for it at Mr. Oman office. And because Truman Bodden, then who was in the cabinet, and we had to send it to cabinet because it's a non-profit organization to get it ratified. And he said that he was not going to ratify because we said Caymanians born only could be members. So we had to alter the memorandum and articles and say Caymanian born and those here of Caymanian status. So we sent out the invitation to all Caymanian lawyers who had Caymanian status. They came, Bill Walker, McDonald, and a whole lot of them came. And they were surprised that we were going to start a Cayman Bar Association. They said, why do we need two associations? Well, we gave all the reasons why we need the two associations, because they were not looking after our problems, and we were then having the first cohorts coming out of the law school, and we needed to protect them from our law school. We needed to protect them and to protect them to have a share of the legal economic pie. They refused to join. And I remember all the things they said. I don't want to go into all that this afternoon, but I remember the things they said. And I said to them, well, if I'm the only member, I'm going to sign a memorandum on the articles, and we signed it up. Myself, Mr. Omar Panon, Oren Marion, Distalive, Keith Collins, and we went on to form the Caymanian Bar Association. We were doing good. We put pressure on the then government, the then executive council, and we eked out a agreement from them that no one could come here to practice law in Cayman unless they had more than 3 years experience on it. And there was only the only exception was if the male or female was married to a Caymanian, they could come to practice. And we did that. It wasn't an agreement, but it was something on our understanding that we had. And from Mr. Orman was the first president, I was the vice president, or Marion, I think it was Peter Polak was treasurer, and our Marion was secretary. And from the time that the Cayman Bar started, they started to whittle away, to trash it, to whittle away at it. Mr. Orman died. I became president of this association. I think I was president for 2 terms, yes. And they then started to whittle out the way to be when I was president about amalgamating with them with the Law Society. And we told them that we were different from the Law Society. Our problems were different from the Law Society. And I think Mr. Sarma Jackson just he alluded to that. They were not going to court to do legal aid. They were not going to court to stand up for the guy who was charged with burglary or the stick of ganja or whatever. They were not doing that. And that's what we did. That's what we had to do. And you know, one of them said to me, I'm not going to say who it was, but one of them said to me, he met me in the streets one day, he says, well, I think you could make a good living off legal aid. In other words, the only sanctions that they could have was to keep us out of the lucrative trade. I remember when I think it was Mr. George McCarthy was the financial secretary. He invited me to join the then private sector advisor committee that he had, and I was invited to go along with them to New York and to Hong Kong and to London when Governor Gore, 45 or 47 of us, lawyers, real estate agents, bankers, accountants, and everything were trying to sell Cayman Offshore Society. I did all of my I did my book called The Cayman Islands, the Ideal Caribbean Financial Center, and I did a lot of stuff. Had spent over $20,000 to get all of my stuff.
Yes, sir.
I was asked to do a dissertation on a continental formation in the Cayman Islands that went into the book that they were given to the people who came to the seminars. I had to. All of their stuff was shipped ahead. I had to carry my stuff myself on the airplane, lugging all of my baggage and stuff on the airplane. They never assisted me.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the trip, I gave a dissertation about continental formation in New York and in London and again in Hong Kong. And at the end of the trip, I never got a client. And I said, you know, why am I not getting a client? Why am I not getting a client? And then the guy who was the coordinator of the trip, Lyndon Martin, said to me a couple of years afterwards, and said, "See, I have a confession to make." And I said, "What is it?" He says, "Those big law firms, told us not to allow your stuff to go out to the delegates, not to send it because you're a loan practitioner, and that would be embarrassing to them." When we had in London, when we got into London and they had a reception where we could meet clients directly, the reception was not in the hotel where we had the seminar, but the reception was across the London in another hotel where another big law firm had put it on, and they had not invited myself, they had not invited Casey Gill, and they had not invited Michael Alberga, and they had not invited the registrar companies from Boston Town. We couldn't go because we were the odd sheep. We were the black sheep, and we couldn't go. So this fight has been going on, where they pushed us out. I was also on the committee to investigate whether or not we should have a stock exchange. with Tim Ridley and W.S. Walker. And when the stock exchange was, we made a report and said, yes, we think we should have it. And was never invited even to a meeting or to when the stock exchange was open. I was never invited.
Mm-hmm. This
is what they do. They're just using the terra firma, the place that we live, for their own goods, for their own gains. They're just using it for their own gains. And the thing that I dropped out and don't have much to say about it is because our own people, a lot of our own people went against us, voted
Yes, sir.
out of office, took over the Cayman Bar Association and then joined them and made us redundant, made the Cayman Bar Association redundant. And we are our own worst enemies. And Tommy can tell you the fight that we've had with our own people to stand up. To stand up. And as long as some of them get a little office in a corner someplace, and they can say, I'm with Mason, or I'm with this, and I'm with Walkers, I'm with this.
Right.
So they can, as long as they can do that, they feel fine and they feel satisfied.
Yeah.
And this is not going to end until they push us all out where we can't practice, where we can't make a living, and then they will take over and so forth. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
It's been a fight that has been going on for ages. They hated Mr. Ormond. They hated me because I stood up to them. They didn't like me. They said all kinds of things about me and tried to get me disbarred and so forth.
Well, Mr. Steve, certainly appreciate your continued perseverance and diligence and great respect. So just leave us there as we continue the discussion and perhaps take the other caller. Yon Moxon and Sarma Jackson joins us, able to facilitate it by our wonderful Kathy Miller. Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon to you, Sterling. How you doing, man?
Blessed and thankful. How about yourself, man?
I'm thankful too, you know. Enjoying the little rough seas out, yeah, on the day off. Me, it's being the sea boy. I don't know what it does, boy, but it sends me on little journeys, you know.
There you go, man. There you go.
Good afternoon to your guests, to Johan, to Sammy, and the young ladies at Shilton.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, Kathy. Yeah, good afternoon. She is holding the fort, my friend, making it all work easily.
Awesome, man. Thank you, man. Just listening to the discussions you all have, and have some questions in my mind to help me connect the dots as a little late person. But I couldn't help but to think I've been wrestling between here and Mr. McField, Dr. McField speak, and I didn't have this in my head, but having heard him, I'm going to preface my questions to the gentleman there that you have as your guest by saying, you know, guys, sounds like it really has been going on for a very long time, and we know this. And I can't help but to think that, you know, when you guys hear about all the other little dollar baby fights that us regular little Caymanians be having, you know, things like cost, minimum wage and those kind of things. Please help us, join us, help fight with us, because we need your legal minds in many respects. And many times, you know, little lay persons that are out there think that our Caymanian lawyers or those in those sort of fields don't really care because they can't relate, certainly when it comes to things like pay. So just remember that, man. Join us in those fights. But having said that, and that is not to say that you don't either, just that I guess we don't see it or hear it. So join us sometimes on those journeys, man. I have some questions to help me to make some sense of this. You mentioned, Sammy, I'm not making a connection between, you said some of the law firms would fall away, the small law firms as a result. Is that as a direct result of this bill? And then if it is, help us to understand why that would happen. That's the first question. The second question would be, or an observation that I had, but it has a question. Using the numbers that you threw out, I can't hear somebody rubbing something. Using the figures that you threw out. Yeah, it's noise in here because I'm in my car in the speaker. But using the figures that you threw out, Sam, in terms of the 180 at the 32,000, let's put that in perspective. I came up with a figure of $5.7 million that you saying government is not getting, and that's assuming their figures are correct. Does this reiteration of the bill seek to address that gap and that loophole? And if it doesn't, then why does it not do that? And then the last one would be, Dwayne Sterling asked you a question.
Sterling Dwayne? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sterling Dwayne asked you a question in relation to benefits of the Cayman Islands, and he did it just before a commercial break, and when you came back, I didn't hear that, and I'm trying to understand if this, and you said it too, Sarma, you said because this bill is very important to the Cayman Islands. So if it's very important to the Cayman Islands, what is it? Why is it very important to the Cayman Islands? What is it that the government is seeking if they've got 2 or 3 reiterations? And then I guess if what you're seeing in terms of the smaller firms fall away, would that be the main reasons why you all are up against this? So help me to connect the dots, because I suspect other people have the same questions, man. Thanks for your time, guys.
All right, thanks very much. And before I ask the response, we have to take the break. Apologies, Johan. Just for listeners, it's sort of that pensive moment. When we come back, we'll get the answers. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Introducing the new Digicel Prime bundles, better than anything we've offered before, with more data than ever, more music on the music, more live sports on Sportsmax, more movies on Playgo, more video chats on BIP. With the new Digicel Prime bundles, it's never been easier to get more digital experiences, plus extra data. Get 50 gigabytes with a 7-day bundle. So much data, so much fun. Buy in My Digicel app today, the Caribbean's fastest mobile network. Digicel, better together.
Maintaining a strong mind and body through sports and general healthy living is a good course of action. But what about your spiritual man, your inner man? He has to be awakened, fed, exercised, strengthened, and led according to the will of God. So, have you heard the call? I'm Evangelist Brother Joseph Joey Ebanks, and I'm inviting you to worship Wednesday and Thursday nights at 7:30. We are bringing the Word of God to our communities as Jesus commanded. Faith comes by hearing. So come and hear. Bring your own chair or simply park and listen to the Word of God from your vehicle, covering the Cayman Islands with the Word of God, one community at a time.
Have you heard the call? We'll be meeting November 11th and 12th at the Windsor Park Playground.
Tell me something, Chanel. You nomophobic?
Nomo who?
Nomophobic.
What that is?
Well, our word of the week is nomophobia.
Nomophobia. It is a noun that means the fear or worry at the idea of being without your phone or unable to use it.
I wonder if Lorena, nomophobic.
This week we'll be having on the flex part of them honorees, Kimon Chambers and
Lorena Marehan.
As always, you can join us this Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. right here on Radio Cayman 89.9 FM, but you can also check us out on YouTube Live. And for Youth Flex, the program for all people by young people. Youth Flex, more than talk.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back to Talk Today. And thanks for joining us, and thanks to the Catherine Miller for sitting ably next to us. We have the wonderful company of Johan Moxham and Sarma Jackson. Kathy, what a fun Tuesday afternoon following a Monday holiday and a torrential downpour.
Well, fun is an interesting word I would use to describe this conversation for sure. That's definitely. I like how you introduced me as the Kathy Miller because thank you. Now I need to have my own show.
There you go.
Let's bring it back to Sam Jackson and the previous caller who had 3 questions that he posed towards you.
Simon, can I just interject for 30 seconds?
Sure.
The great questions, and Dwayne is a super sharp guy. Always enjoy having private conversations with him, and then he calls into the shows, and he really, tries to make it all.
Yeah, big butt coming.
No, there's no butt at all. It's just that I would say he was making the point, and I think I know my record is publicly on a lot of issues of national importance, and I think Sam is very much like-minded. But isn't it a shame that we could talk about, there's a private citizen out there who's talking about the need for representation and assistance from people with a particular skill set or expertise on issues, and I think he alluded to minimum wage and workplace affairs. Why do you have 19 MLAs who are well paid, well compensated, respected, they have all the pomp and circumstance that goes with it, but they're not reflecting, or policies are not reflecting the people that they represent? So you have a caller like Dwayne, he comes in, he makes a completely valid point, and I'm thinking to myself, do you really need lawyers to challenge and to stand up and to fight the fight when we all go to the polls thinking that we are electing people that will represent the widest cross-section of Caymanian people and deal with the pressing issues that exist in the Cayman Islands? For example, the minimum wage is currently $6 an hour. Now, the government, by their actions, have demonstrated that the minimum wage should be $10 an hour. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but what I'm saying is the evidence of the point that I'm making is the work program, not the work program, what is it they call it? The cleanup program, where they have people come in and they clean up the side of the road, they paint and they do this and they do whatever. If you're paying, as the Cayman Islands government, to those persons $10 an hour, but the minimum wage is $6 an hour, 19 representatives are supposed to know government policy is now we're paying a minimum of $10 an hour or we should be paying a minimum of $10 an hour as the rate. And that's the point that I'm making. Why does everything have to be a fight? Why does there have to be people who question publicly doing the right thing when the government have already set the bar as to what the right thing is in that particular instance? They are well paid. They're going to knock on your door. They're going to show up and say, support me, but they're not going to do anything at a policy level that helps you survive in the most expensive country in the Cayman Islands. And that for me is disappointing, truth be told. But
I agree.
I'll transfer to Sally from there.
I agree, Johan. Just before I answer the three specific questions, I agree that the cost of living has reached a level where $6 an hour is simply not practical. And if we don't get a bridle on that, continued increase in cost of living, and all of these initiatives that you and I talk about so much, right, on air and off the air, are what is driving that cost of living higher every day. And certainly if we don't get things right, like legislation that governs major industries that are supposed to be contributing significantly to the coffers of the Cayman Islands reserves, that money is going to have to come from somewhere else. But to answer those questions that the former caller raised, when I spoke about small firms going away, I should have been more specific in that it's not just that this bill threatens those small firms. It's initiatives that have been put in place. Dr. Steve talked about that to some extent. There is discriminatory action and neglect, even at a government level, when it comes to those smaller firms. There is this impression, they're insignificant in the whole grand scheme of things. They don't generate the sort of impressive revenues of a financial services firm, etc. And the small firms will simply go away if we have to conform to the same level of regulation of one of those big firms. Right now, we are struggling with anti-money laundering regulations. Not that any of us say that that's a bad thing. We should conform to the internationally recognized standards as best we can. But there's clearly no risk-based assessment for these firms. The firms that are carry a really high risk of money laundering are the ones that deal with massive amounts of money crossing borders. And yet you hold us to the same standard. You expect us to have a special officer, right, to do AML, documenting, etc. How are the firms going to actually cope with that? The answer is they can't, right? They cannot sustain continued increased costs and distraction from the work that generates revenue for them. If they have to stop doing their legal work representing their clients, well, first of all, some of their clients are going to get ticked off and leave, right? Go somewhere else. And then they won't have the income from billing because they survive. You know, we all work on a billable hours concept, right? If we don't have hours available to bill clients because we're trying to manage this monster of a thing that's been implemented by government without consulting us, that is not sustainable. And the small firms will go away. There are a number of them that are struggling. I can tell you that. I know that for a fact.
As a corollary, if you look at, and we're not just talking about law firms in the strict sense, we're talking about corporate services firms and financial services in general.
All businesses.
all businesses. The costs associated, and don't get me wrong, for the record, I believe in being fully compliant. I believe in ensuring that you have quality business on the books. I believe that it is imperative that the reputation of the jurisdiction is protected at all costs. That's what brings business to the shores. However, where things go off the rails is the Cayman Islands is thankfully off of the EU blacklist now. Government would be congratulated for that, even though it was their own sort of inactivity or failure that caused us being on the list. They've got us off. Great job, guys. Now we're off the list and we're still passing legislation that our competitors are not passing, demanding greater amounts of loopholes or standards for us to jump through. I believe that we should always be competitive. We should be complying with all international standards. But if our competitors are not doing the same thing, why is this government signing us up to every agreement under the sun that our competitors are not signed up to? It makes business cumbersome, it makes business expensive, and it drives away opportunity and jobs. And when you look at the middle class of the Cayman Islands society, they're in two places. They're in the civil service or they're in financial services. And when decisions get made by businesses that are losing business because we have signed up to extra levels of compliance, so on and so forth, that our competitors are not doing, which puts us at a competitive disadvantage, jobs will then be negatively impacted. And if you look at the policy of the Cayman Islands government, they're always comfortable when Caymanians are the first ones to be let go. And so the trickle-on effect of poor decision leads to negative result, which leads to directly impacting Caymanians being employed. And I'm not saying that because I'm a troublemaker or I'm trying to cast blame. The facts and the statistics support me and the position that I've just stated, period. Can we do better? Must we do better? The source issue is if you're only consulting with 4 businesses or 4 people in industry, and what the big shops do doesn't necessarily reflect what everybody in industry does, that's not a fair representation of consultation. Now, the government get bent out of shape when I say these things, but I pay my fees just like every other big firm, and I expect for me and my colleagues in industry to be represented or to have our views represented, because guess what? We're Caymanians too, and we matter.
We do have a couple more questions to ask and answer. We have some calls, but respectfully, we have the 2 o'clock headlines as well. Let's pause, take the break. When we come back, more talk today.
Continuing the Caymanian tradition.
Let Cora keep my ground so clean.
The heart and soul of the Cayman people. Thank you for keeping the culture alive.
There's business news every day. From East End to Georgetown, down into West Bay.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have, on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
With your latest headlines, I'm Felicia Rankin-Solins. A man aged 35 of Georgetown has been formally charged with arson in relation to the fire which occurred at the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service Business Center at Windjammer Plaza on Monday, October 26th. He has also been charged with arson in relation to another incident which occurred on August 13th, where a vehicle was set on fire, as well as possession of ganja, consumption of ganja, and 5 counts of driving while disqualified. In international news, the hunt to reunite families separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance migration policy is looking for the parents of even more children, an email seen by NBC News says. The search involves 666 children rather than the 545 known last month. Glaciers in China are disappearing at a shocking rate as global warming brings unpredictable change and raises the prospect of crippling long-term water shortages, scientists say. The largest glacier in the 500-mile mountain chain has retreated about 450 meters since the 1950s, when researchers set up China's first monitoring station to study it. Ken Spears, the co-creator of the cartoon series Scooby-Doo, has died at the age of 82. Spears, who created the animated characters alongside his creative partner Joe Ruby, died of complications from Lewy body dementia. Their original show, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, only ran for 2 series from 1969 to 1970, but established a template that would spawn 50 years of stories. Those are your headlines. I'm Felicia Rankin-Zollins.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio K-Man on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio K-Man app or log on to our website, radiokman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thanks for joining us. And as we have the excellent company of Sarma Jackson and Johan Moxo, we also, mildly reminded of importance of decorum with the presence of the Kathy Miller. We do have a call online. Let's go to the phones. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
And good afternoon to your guests.
Good afternoon,
ma'am. Yes, I'm very grateful, Mr. Ebanks.
Yes,
and how are you doing?
Oh, blessed and thankful, man. I got accused of being handsome earlier.
Yeah, I know that. You're from SB. Anyway, yeah, that's a plus. That's one of our little pluses.
There you go.
Don't have too many. But anyway, I just wanted to commend your two guests there, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Moxon. And I just want to thank them for coming in and sharing those kind words and very important topics with us.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it goes across to do with the minimum wage. And that is the effects of it, as we all know. And that also goes right across all sectors of the island. And one of the things that I've noticed, and Mr. Maxfield, Dr. Maxfield, commend him so highly and so grateful for all the history and the knowledge that he is still able to share with us, even getting up in age, that he so willingly and able to share with us regarding so many topics, as well as the practitioners' bill. I just wanted to say this, that in general, we Caymanians, I have to say it this way, really blunt and true, generational Caymanians, we are always the ones, to me, that I call it the underdog way, because we we fight, and we try to do our best in helping with these situations, but it's usually in the law firms and in the people that work here on work permits, and these law firms, I'm including the
yes, ma'am.
the UK, Canada, the States, and the Caribbean. A lot of people, sometimes we kind of dismiss that part of it, Caribbean, However, I think the ones that really suffer and is at loss on this is generational Caymanians, not the Cayman status holders, not the new Caymanians. We have eyes, and if we look around and we know and we can see, it's usually the generational Caymanians that are left by themselves, left alone, not paid any attention. Whatever they're saying, it's not acknowledged, and anything put in place, policies put in place for them. It's always the others that benefit from this. From those things that we try so hard to implement, we try hard to do, we do it, but it's always them, the others that benefit more than the generational Caymanians. So actually, that is about all I have to say for right now.
Thank you very much.
I do thank those gentlemen that are there, and hopefully they'll be able to come back again. And as always, God bless Dr. Maxfield for the passion and the knowledge, the wisdom that he shares.
Amen.
However, when we look, he is the prime and perfect example of a generational Caymanian.
Hey, thank you, Mom. God bless as well.
Yes.
All right, enjoy your afternoon. Okay.
Yes, you too.
Take care. Miss Catherine?
We're giving this right back to Sammy. He's got a couple questions left to answer.
The question was asked based on the simple mathematical calculation of 180 lawyers, which was the number given, I think, 10 years ago.
Right.
Which equated to $5 million per year in lost revenue from work permits alone, basing it on the very lowest rung of work permit fee. The question was asked based on that, whether this bill addresses that. The answer is simply no. What they're proposing to do is for a mere extra $2,000 per person to license people to practice overseas law wherever they are. So where my practicing certificate costs $2,000 per year, theirs will cost $4,000 per year. That is a pittance. That is actually an insult, because it's clear as clear can be is that they should be paying at least the equivalent of what someone else whose hair is paying in order to be bestowed with the equivalent status of someone who's here. It's just a matter of fairness, right? Balance.
And that is the certification that you're
the practice certificate is what you have to get every year in order to be allowed to practice law. And here's the thing. Under the current legislation, this ties into the next question, which is why it's important. The current legislation, somehow government has never seen fit, although they would never receive any resistance from anyone. The current penalty, and I believe it's been unchanged since 1969, for practicing law without a certificate is $200.
That's it?
$200.
Wow, I think I got
so
a speeding ticket.
So you can understand why people are not afraid to offend the law.
Wow, of course not.
But there is obviously other sanction. The problem with other sanction is currently under the bare bones legislative regime we have, the Chief Justice is the ultimate arbiter of any complaints regarding misconduct, etc. And I know from past discussions that myself and Miss Teresa Pitcairn and Sherry Borden had with the Chief Justice when we consulted with everyone in the legal fraternity back in 2010, that because he is also the Chief Judicial Officer of the land, and because disputes regarding any issue with any regulator ultimately has to be decided by the courts, there is an inherent conflict of interest. So having that at the back of my mind, the minute I read Section 3 of the bill and I saw that the Chief Justice was on it, not that I don't think that he's a fit and proper person, I absolutely do. But the problem is, he himself has said, well, if I'm on the regulatory board, right, that's what they're proposing here.
They are.
What happens then if someone needs to judicially review or bring a Section 26(1) constitutional action against the board that I'm sitting on, right? That would be what I would imagine he'd ask himself based on that discussion. It's a valid point. To try to address that, this law makes the first instance appeal to the Court of Appeal for any dispute regarding a decision of the board. The problem with that is that board will have the authority to revoke people's license to practice, which is necessary, right? But a court of appeal is basically a circuit court. They come here every few months. They have specific sessions, and they have a huge backlog. So what happens to the guy who gets unfairly dismissed and he needs to have his matter adjudicated on in a timely manner?
Right.
He might go to the bottom of the list. He might be without a certificate for a year. We don't know. But in any event, you still have the added problem of constitutional challenges by virtue of the provisions of the Constitution itself have to be brought to the Grand Court. How do you address that concern? This thing hasn't been very, very well thought through. Or if it has, it was designed to create blockades to certain avenues of redress. Let me put it that way. If that is the case, then that's sad. But again, going back to the wider point, right? So to answer the final question, why is it important to Cayman? It's enshrined in what I just said. We need proper regulation of the legal industry. It is a very essential and important industry. There's no question about that. It's more to it than just a code of conduct. We need ultimately a regulator who has the ability to independently ensure, regulate through regulation, that lawyers in the profession, whether they're here on the island or outside, wherever they may be representing the Cayman Islands jurisdiction, that they behave themselves. They conform to they recognize rules, requirements, and codes of conduct. And unless we get the legislation advanced in that regard, we are going to still be floundering, and there's still going to be things that can be, let's just say, not put under the microscope, not looked at properly.
Right.
We have, Mr. McVeal adverted to that, we have lots of issues with Caymanians being treated unfairly. That provokes the question of, why is it that in this brand new piece of legislation, we don't have provisions similar to what we have to regulate the ICT, telecom, etc. industry, and the Electricity Regulatory Authority
right.
Industries, right?
That brings me to a question.
Anti-competitive practice provisions. That's where I'd like to see us get to, when you have provisions where you have a defined code of conduct, not in just in terms of how you behave to represent, but how you behave with regards to others. The code of conduct would go a long ways towards that, but we need to have, for that to be meaningful, for that to fulfill its purpose, we need an independent regulator who doesn't have conflicts of interest. And that is the thing that bothers me. Why is it that we can't get to a point where, because everyone is ad idem about that needing to happen to advance the profession. Why is it we can't promulgate that and leave the rest of it as suggested by my learned senior, Mr. Paget Brown? Why not? Why would we want to rush headlong into this now of all times, not knowing the fallout from COVID-19, right? Not knowing the state of our economy, not knowing what job opportunities we might have as a direct result of that, no matter what we do. Why would we want to literally put that at risk? We could literally be throwing gasoline on an open fire, so to speak, if we promulgate this and let all those folks who have been illicitly practicing overseas, because that's what they're doing, right? To get certificates, there wouldn't be any spaces left if they can circumvent the immigration law. I mean, just think about the possibilities, right, of perverse practices that could be implemented. And we're talking about lawyers, very smart and creative people who can maneuver around any sort of provision, right?
Well, we would hope they don't really do that, do they?
When it
comes to you've mentioned some things that you're definitely not happy with. How can we improve this process?
Well, the process of what? Regulating the industry?
Yes.
We create the independent statutory regulator. We populate it, and I don't care whether it's appointed by the premier or the leader of opposition or whatever. If there's a clear, transparent, sustainable system of appointment, the way they're done in other pieces of legislation, typically they're appointed by cabinet, but they have to meet certain qualifying criteria. All the modern statutory authorities, they have to have a certain skill set relevant to the task that they're given. They need to ensure they have no conflicts of interest. It's pretty basic stuff.
So aside from the independent regulatory body that you would like to see, what are the other changes that you would like to see in this bill?
Well,
major. I
don't know
I'm
if,
sure there's
if you,
quite a
if
few.
you want to get me started, but
well, I think it's important because you're unhappy with something and you have your input.
Right.
So,
well,
how can we improve this bill that you, as a Caymanian a sole practitioner, would want to see that would help benefit you in generations to come?
They have this concept of Caymanians only of an attorney at law only being able to practice if overseas if he's the employee of an affiliate, and they've defined affiliate as a overseas law office connected to a locally licensed firm, right? That can't be the case. Any Caymanian that has a practice, holds a practice certificate, who's on a roll, right, registered as an attorney, should be able to go and practice Cayman Islands law from wherever he wants. If I wanted to take 6 months off and go somewhere else and practice law remotely, which is possible, I shouldn't be penalized for that, especially when this affiliate belongs to a recognized firm, which has no special qualifying criteria, no special requirements it has to meet. It's just, one of the old boys club. And I tell you what has driven this bill now. I know exactly what has brought this on now. Why all of a sudden there's an urgent rush to get this passed, right? Once again at the tail end of an administration, despite all that history has taught or should have taught those involved. There is going to be the advent of a very large law firm in Cayman, connected to one of the big financial services firms. That has these large law firms that we consider large very, very concerned, because all of a sudden there's a bigger bull in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Being blunt about it, that's how they look at it.
Right.
And I know for a fact that the announcement that was coming drove the current president of SILPA to call a meeting. This is a wonderful thing, with the Attorney General, the Premier, Minister Hugh, a number of the representatives of the large firm, Cayman Islands-based law firms, and 2 persons who are not even lawyers, who are connected to that entity that's coming, to have an emergency meeting in the back rooms of the Legislative Assembly just the other day. I've spoken to people who participated. It's not clear why all of a sudden there's a great concern, because these folks are going to do what those firms before, the Georgetown, I call them the cartel, because they sort of operate like with a common cause. But it's clear to me that their concern speaks volumes about what they intended to do. And based on what was said at this meeting, I don't want to get into any more of that, but suffice it to say that all of this causes great concern. If we are not able, right, to create, and this is one of the things I'd like to see in the bill, I would like to see every law firm have to meet qualifying criteria to get an operational license. So not only do individual lawyers have to meet the qualifying criteria to practice as a lawyer, but the entity that he works for should have to meet qualifying criteria to get an operational license, not just pay a couple of $100,000 to the government every year. I mean, not to downplay that. They should have to pay that too. But there needs to be a process, right, where the Cayman Islands jurisdiction and those players in it, those folks who are underground, who've practiced, eat to the living here all these years, are protected from those, including those same firms who hitherto weren't on our side. Their concern is now that these folks are coming, and therefore they may be willing to think about all of a sudden, though that thing which they was not part of the discussion. They refused to discuss at all, which was the Cayman 60-40%, the Cayman ownership and control of law firms. They have hitherto said we can't do that because they're global. That's what the Premier told me. Mm-hmm. That was the most recent invention. Before that, they said, you're going to destroy all the law firms. It's simply not viable. And we had people like the current leader of the opposition ask publicly in a meeting where it involved a large cross-section of the legal profession, why is it that we continue to make we know how many of your partners we made Caymanian. How many our Caymanians have you made partners? That is to underscore the fact that despite us awarding status to these folks on the basis that they're connected to these firms that have come here and worked and generated revenues and all that sort of stuff, we gave them that Cayman status, but yet they still were resisting up until 2017. That was one of the reasons the bill was pulled. The typical structure of that applies to all other businesses, which is the Cayman ownership and control.
Right.
Now they're willing to consider it because they feel threatened, and that to me sort of smacks of disingenuousness. And I haven't seen that reflected in this bill, probably because this was drafted before that recent emergency. But I hope to see some movement in that direction. There's lots of other little stuff. I can say this. ALPA, the organization I belong to, we're going through this systematically. We've had a couple of meetings now. We are going to produce a report, and we are going to publish that report. We're going to say, this is our position on this bill, and each and every element that we have concern. And that will, any member of the public that wants to inform themselves as to what the typical Caymanian practitioner thinks about this bill, they'll be able to read that and know.
Is this because I understand that the period for public consultation ends on November 24th? So is this something that we look forward to seeing before November 24th?
Indeed, very soon.
Okay. And for anybody else in the public that wants to see what this legal services bill is about, gazettes.gov.ky. You got to do a little search on there. I can't give you the whole URL. You can search there. You can send your comments to, I don't want to give the first name wrong, but it's Tesia, I believe, Scott. So TESIA.scott@gov.ky. You can send your comments there as well.
But Kathy, wouldn't it be interesting that, because we've seen this movie before, in 2017, it was, they went through this process, same sort of issues crop up. And then as you enter the political season of, election, people get stage fright and they start thinking, oh, wow, this could cost me votes. So let me pull a bill now and try and save myself at the polls. I would imagine that this crew are going to do exactly the same thing because their sort of popularity is at an all-time low. If you look at the headlines, every week there's a crisis or mismanagement of something, whether it be the airport, whether it be a $160 million school, funds unaccounted for. You got some issues in the LA. Nobody likes CPR, and I was one of those persons that played a role in that. But thank God that we were all able to come together, find collective purpose, and fight the nonsense and the lies that we were told by the current administration, who all said that was going to be the panacea for everything. Can you imagine the disaster we would be going through right now if we didn't challenge them in the courts and basically stop the dock project?
Absolutely. Where's Ms. Rolston's OBE, by the way?
Oh, come on! She's no. You think of Shirley Rolston, you think of Craig Merrin, you think of Vernie Coe. What they've done over a 12-month period to fight the fight and represent what is best about Cayman, this government will never acknowledge that because you know what? They didn't get their way, and that's what's wrong. You have to be with them to be acknowledged. You can't do the right thing unless you're with them, and that's a problem across the board.
Well, I can tell the government one thing: if their intent is to continue to make history repeat itself, then they do that at their own peril. Because as battle weary as I am over this same piece of legislation with a different label on it, I'm going to do what I can to call to action anyone that is willing to stand up. And I say this for the benefit, and I hope I don't hurt anyone's feelings, but there's a lot of folks out there that like to exist at the periphery and see how it goes, which way the wind blows. They say all kinds of encouraging things, and I'm going to say to them, grow up here. Step up. Help us make the fight a little less bloody this time. Say a piece. Read the bill. First, that's the first thing you need to do. I mean, I'm shocked to know how many parliamentarians don't even read legislation and go down there to try to debate it. But Johan is absolutely right. This is just another product of, representing special interests. And I want to explain to Johan what's happening here. This is how Johan, you get campaign contributions from the people that give you campaign contributions. There's a special interest group, and then you pull it so you save face with the voters. You're right. We've seen this movie before.
I think in the development game, that's what you do with the development agreements that Minister Joey Hew has said
don't get me started
will be confidential and they're commercially sensitive, and we must never know how concessions are doled out like candies.
That's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard.
Well, it is the most politicized.
Commercially sensitive way.
Because he said so, and because the Premier said so, and because at the end of the day, they don't believe in three basic things: transparency, accountability, and good governance.
Those things that they preach so much.
Listen,
they won elections on.
So, gents, we're going to pause quickly, take the final break. When we come back, let's continue discussion. Stay tuned.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. Did you know that between May and August 31st, in support of the COVID-19 Emergency Withdrawal Program, the Chamber Pension Plan leveraged IT and human resources to successfully review over 16,000 member applications, approve over 12,000 applications, and paid over CI $130 million to our plan members. We are the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan, and we're here for you. For further information regarding the Emergency Withdrawal Program, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630.
While some doors close, our online banking is always open. At Cayman National, you can bank anytime from anywhere through our online banking platform. Skip the line, save time, and use a service that fits your schedule. Enjoy reduced fees and benefit from own account transfers, third-party account transfers, electronic funds transfer, and bill payments, all at your convenience. We're your bank, and we're here for you anytime.
As the community continues to take precautions from COVID-19 and get ready for the hurricane season, it is important to also protect our environment, which ultimately helps us live healthier, happier lives. Let's always remember proper disposal of masks and other PPE, as with your normal garbage. Avoid littering and do not include any trash in your recycling. Protect yourselves and keep our islands clean. For full guidance, visit www.deh.gov.ky.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for our guests, Sarma Jackson, Johan Moxo, and thanks for the enlightening conversation, and really, really grateful that Kathy Miller would sit with us. So after today, Mom, I hope you still have a job, because
hey, we all have our opinions. Johan expressed his thinking that government is not necessarily doing anything right now for the country. Not anything, but they failed a number of things.
The hypocrisy is what is staggering, and the disingenuous way in which they approach things is what staggers us, because you can't say you're looking out for the country, but you're only looking out for a select few. And if you're only consulting with a select few, then really are you truly representing the vast majority of the people? And that's in this piece of legislation, that's in the public access, beach access laws, that's in everything that they do. And that's the issue, because at some point we're all paying for this.
I mean, I argue that a little bit. So for my opinion, not just because I work for government, I think there's some situations that they handle quite well. And I do think there are some projects that they are very open in asking for public consultation on. Of more recent, this, I can't say I have the background to say, hey, this is the steps that government did to publicly consult and speak with other attorneys in Cayman about how to best come with this bill. So, differences, which is great.
That's a great answer as well. Being a civil servant, I would say exactly the same thing, Sterling, you should take a page out of that book, to be honest with you. It was good knowing you, Sterling.
Yes. I enjoy. All right, I know we're getting to near the end of today's program, but I trust that this will be continuing discussion. Now, Mr. Fox, do we have another call? All right. Kathy, we can take some calls. What do you think?
Definitely, let's take some calls.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for calling.
Mr. Sterling.
Good afternoon, Mom. How are you?
Welcome back. I'm really, really bad because I'm hearing things all day long today.
Yeah?
Anyhow, talking about people doing things to people, campaign finance reform is the second item on my wish list. The first one, of course, being immigration, total immigration.
Amen.
In the light of day, working after 3 o'clock in the evening in the Cayman Islands, sun still shining, but we won't see it. And now, look here, fast tracking our Cayman trained lawyers, so on and so forth, for the judiciary would please me. They mightn't be as good because we're not as good as nothing, but we put our to get the job done. And forget that recall vote. Don't forget that recall vote. Blame then Warren. I don't know anything about it, but it sounds good. It just sounds good. And guys who's struggling so hard, Johan Markram, you live down road person, you. Standards in public life, I heard it to come off the shelf. I hear still a work in progress, but they got off the shelf. You keep fighting, baby. You keep fighting. You get there. You're young. That's what you got. That none of the rest of us ain't got time. You have time. They're afraid of running for this and that. They need to be afraid of running for the other things called time. And I have time on our hands. On a fight clean, not for sale, not for rent to anybody. You're fighting for your children. Your children. You're not fighting for an expensive bottle of champagne or adult games after dark. You're fighting for your children.
Yes, Mom.
Amen. Couldn't agree more. Hallelujah.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye. Take care, Mom. All the best.
Oh, I can't take it.
Thanks. All right, I think we can take...
Bye.
Thanks very much. One maybe final call and then some more discussion. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thanks for calling. Hey, good... Okay, the caller has... all right. Well, Ms. Kathy, I turn it to you. Anything you want to ask? And let's continue the discussion. I mean, let's have fun.
Well, for me, I believe that you had another question that popped up via...
Yeah, we did have
I'm not sure if you're going to...
Thank you. A WhatsApp question. Let's ask it. If the listener on WhatsApp asks, how do these legal changes in respect to law firms practicing Cayman law overseas compare with our competitors, for example, Bermuda?
To the best of my knowledge and belief, they don't have anything along the lines of this, what we have promoted here, we've created here. We know the BVI experimented with, and there was a lot of, and I have to admit I haven't followed that. I find it hard enough keeping up with what's going on in Cayman, but I do not believe that there's any other jurisdiction that's trying to do what we are trying to do in terms of licensing overseas practitioners without them being qualified. I think that's just simply reckless of a jurisdiction to do. You have no idea what these folks have done, right? There's serious implications. I'll give you a classic example: lack of legal privilege, right? We know the Pauline case. Remember Mr. Martin Pauline came here to work for the Attorney General. I reminded AG about that when we met last year. He went back to the UK and was promptly disbarred for holding himself out as an attorney in the Cayman Islands, even though he was working for our Attorney General. But one of the most important things that came out of that decision was that they was the dicta of the case where the ruling indicated or enunciated or that there is no legal privilege that applies to a person who holds themselves out as a lawyer. Now, I made the next logical step and said, well, what are these folks, all of these hundreds of pretend lawyers we have all over the world, what are they doing if it's tax-related work, right? And one of those foreign jurisdictions that loves to give us more, as Johan would say, keep raising the bar, finds out that particular entity, attorney or whatever, is practicing tax-related law right? Or assisting in what they term tax avoidance in, say, Mauritius. And that person passes through one of those jurisdictions and gets arrested with a bunch of documents. There won't be any legal privilege to protect him or his clients. And if we are going to advocate, and not only advocate, but promote a system that licenses folks who have done that sort of thing, right, who have exposed us to that level of risk as a jurisdiction, we are nothing but reckless. And we don't know, because of the absolute lack of regulation, we don't know what they've done to date. So there needs to be a process, a clear, transparent process when there's an application. And if they're going to be licensed ultimately, I say in the short term, there shouldn't be any licensing. I say, I agree with Mr. Pageant. We should actually park all of that overseas, this whole concept of an affiliate of a recognized firm, park that for now, pass the majority of the bill, no, and revisit that after this whole COVID cloud moves on and we can assess the damage. And we need to start now undertaking the necessary investigations as to how that has impacted Cayman's economy and how it will continue to impact Cayman's economy if we license it in the way that it is being proposed. And then, only then, can we make a responsible, informed decision as a country, as a government, in creating legislation which could literally cost us millions, if not billions, right? And cost us the future of many Caymanians in the legal profession. This is serious business, and Johan spoke to that earlier. It's not just this. This is something that is near to me. I don't purport to know everything I need to know, as one former minister told me. He knew everything he needed to know about anything he needed to know anything about. So I stick to things that I know, and this is my ball of wax. I'm looking at this as a threat to the profession that I'm in. So I thought I'd come and share my perspective, right? Particularly because I learned, to my shock and horror, that the Premier has misrepresented to the leader of the opposition as to what my position is. Said even Sarma Jackson is happy with this version of the bill, and I don't know how he knew that. So that was what provoked me to come here today to talk about this. There's many other things, like Johan, that I have an opinion on. And I will be happy to speak to anyone that wants to speak to me about that and share that with the public airwaves in the future. Right. But I agree with Johan. This is simply a symptom of a sick government. We cannot continue to go down the road of just doing whatever we want to do, blowing the public off, telling them, oh well, this is privileged, like the Rich Report. It's privileged, yeah, but you can waive privilege. It's your document, right? I am so disappointed in this particular government because they ran initially. They won a landslide way back when, and on the basis that they were going to transform Cayman politics into this new, transparent, responsible era of politics where everyone knew what was going on. And of late, they've been anything but. Johan spoke to the development agreements. I don't want to get into that because that raises a myriad of issues, but I can tell you one thing. Just like how you shouldn't use the term Chinese wall in relation to AML regulation, you should not be using, as a minister standing in the floor of the LA, the term commercially sensitive when you're talking about a massive contract, right, that benefits private individuals at a great expense to the public purse. That has no place. That is the greatest, with the greatest respect to the minister. I don't know what he was thinking. That is certainly not commercially sensitive. And I'll tell you something else. One of those development agreements was actually acquired by a FOI request, and it turns out by my client, who had to sue the government in order to get it, right? Because they insisted on not disclosing it. And when you look at that, I'm talking about the Beach Bay development agreement, just so we're clear, right? I heard Johan addressing this the other day. It's shocking to know that we have come to that. When the development agreements come out of a concept that I promoted myself back when I worked as Crown Counsel with planning ministry, and we thought it was a good idea to create a concept where the development, the planning authority could engage directly in a contractual relationship. They do that in the UK, Section 106 of their Act, that to provide for infrastructural needs and that sort of thing. So in that model, revenues flow the other way. So if you're a developer and you want a massive development approved, you go and negotiate, not with the government, not with the politicians, you go and negotiate directly with the planning authority, and the planning authority says, well, we need this green space, we need this road, we need a school enhanced, the things that a responsible society does, right? Infrastructure, they look at the big picture, because that's what planning is about. We took that and turned it on its head, where we do the reverse. We are using that model right now to license developers to get concessions from government. And I know I got a lot of clients that wouldn't want to hear me say this, but the truth is, if we're gonna go down that road, at some point we are going to come to the conclusion that if we can't get revenues, right, because development, you only get one shot at getting the revenue from that. That's when it's built, and after that, when it's sales, that one-off stamp duty transfer charge. Once you lose that opportunity, how are you gonna get anything back? And we have a definitive amount of space in Cayman, very little at that. So,
as a corollary to that, for me, it's really simple. When you talk about transparency and accountability, the precedent has been set. The Cayman Islands government negotiated with large developer something called the 4 Cayman Investment Alliance. That agreement is in the public domain. So how in the world does the current Minister of Planning, Infrastructure and Commerce decide or take it upon himself to say, well, I can't share any of the details about any current or previous development agreements that he's either party to, negotiated, or negotiating, when we already have precedent where the 4 Cayman Investment Alliance, say whatever you want about McKeever Bush and his government. That was in the public domain for us all to know what that's supposed to look like. There is nobody in this government that can tell you how many development agreements they've signed. No one can tell you the total value of the concession packages that have been granted, yet we know that concession packages range in value from $200 million over a 50-year period to $400 million. Now that is surrendering current and potential revenue at a time when the country is broke. When you have a deficit of $168 million and you only have one major revenue stream, which is the pillar of financial services that now represents over 65% of your GDP, because you've lost all of your revenue from the tourism sort of industry, and you're now negotiating giveaways and concession packages in the development space to your friends, to your political supporters, to your donors. Ladies and gentlemen, that is ensuring that we are accelerating the implementation of some form of direct taxation down the road.
Agreed.
And here's the thing. Joseph Hugh, Minister of Infrastructure, Planning and Commerce, has yet to negotiate any development agreements that say specifically this project must guarantee 60% of Caymanians on the workforce, pre-construction, post-construction, and at the completion of the project. There are no development agreements that speak to scholarships, training, and development opportunities for Caymanians given the fact that the government is negotiating these deals. If you are negotiating deals for your people and ensuring that we have work and opportunity, but you are surrendering current and future revenues over a 25 and 50-year period, how is that a good deal for the people of the Cayman Islands? And I'm calling him out because he's the person that was crazy enough to go on the floor of the LA and say, well, it's confidential and it's commercially sensitive. That is not his money. That is revenue. That is for the people of the Cayman Islands and the government of the Cayman Islands. And when you surrender revenue, how are you going to pay for the roads? How are you going to pay for the schools? How are you going to pay for the basic infrastructure that we need when this is the same government that is trying to get to 100,000 people as a population? You cannot do it all. You cannot talk about being transparent and being accountable, yet you lie. you mislead, you misrepresent, and then you're brazen enough to say, well, I don't have to share that with you. If McKeeva Bush had to share the content and the information of what the 4K Mannion Investment Alliance deal looked like, Joseph Hugh, Alden McLaughlin, and every member of cabinet are compelled to share that information with us because it's not their money. They're going to retire or get voted out of office to fat pensions, a good life, but who's going to be left picking up the pieces? Everybody in this room and everybody that owns a business, because at some point you have to fill the revenue gap by increased fees. At some point, government has to find a way to collect money in after they've surrendered. But by that time, those guys already be fat and retired somewhere. So my question is, Governor's office, where are you? Because you're responsible for good governance. Auditor General's office, where are you? Because these decisions that are politicized and ad hoc decisions that are being made across many ministries, but in particular by the Ministry of Planning, Infrastructure and Commerce, we need to understand what the quid pro quo was and the value for money proposition that allowed these sort of ad hoc decisions to be made, and what is the total benefit and loss to the government of the Cayman Islands at a time when COVID has shown us we are susceptible and in dire need of revenue.
Gents, it's been a wonderful afternoon. If nothing as informative and hopefully evocative, get our populace asking questions and engage in the process. Very much appreciate the time. Before we close up, Ms. Kathy, I mean, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a great show. A lot of information has been given out. A lot of passion, I would say, exuded, which is really important, because if it didn't matter, you wouldn't be here giving your viewpoints, and we need to give all viewpoints, and that's the most important thing to get the country moving forward, to do the best we can for Cayman, to build the country as positively as we can. I want to remind people that for them to view the legal services bill, to go to gazettes.gov.ky. You can email your comments to tesia.scott@gov.ky. Sorry if I've butchered the name. It's tesia.scott@gov.ky. You have until November 24th to do so. And Sammy, as you had said, ALPA?
Yes.
We'll have a report coming out on your views of this legal services bill before then, so the public can see two different sides of how this bill will affect the islands.
Well, you'll certainly see our side. I don't know if you'll ever see the other side. Other than in whatever overt actions we can discern their motives from. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Okay. Good stuff. But, thanks very much, Mr. Moxell.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. Thank you all seriously very much. And this is why we have a healthy society, if we're willing to engage and always be respectful and responsible in our endeavors. We can get to a place where we have a safe, secure, stable society.
That's what we want, I think.
And that's what we want. All right, we started off today's discussion with local author Joshua J. Dilbert. Tomorrow we'll have Mr. Graham Morris join us at the first part of the show. I love to read, and if someone wants to read me a bedtime story, I'll ask it. So tomorrow that'll be the start of our discussion, Kathy. I'm hoping that your schedule allows and you can sit with us again.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, 2 days in a row. Man, life gets better. Until tomorrow, join us after the midday news and midday meditation for Talk Today. But please start your morning off for the record with Mr. Art Connor. And now stay tuned for all the Radio Cayman has to continue to offer. So until then, be blessed.
Talk Today is brought to you by Fidelity Bank. For all your banking needs, visit fidelitygroup.com. Fidelity, we're